Hi, it's Katrina! From stealing the heart of a saint to finding human remains in your backyard, here are 9 creepy archaeological discoveries. Number 9. The heart of a saint. In March 2012, a sneaky thief stole the 800-year-old heart of Saint Laurence O'Toole, Dublin's patron saint, from the Christ Church Cathedral. The intruder, who investigators believe may have hidden in the church overnight, took the time to light 2 candles at the altar before making off with the relic. Saint Laurence was born in 1132 in what is now County Kildare. In 1161, he was appointed as the Archbishop of Dublin. During his time there, he helped found the Augustinian order in the city, reformed Ireland's monastic orders, and acted as a peacekeeper during the Anglo-Norman invasions of Ireland. The pious priest passed away during a peacekeeping mission in Normandy in 1180 and was canonized or declared a saint in 1225. His heart was kept on display at the cathedral inside a wooden heart-shaped box in an iron cage. The thief who stole it in 2012 is thought to have used wire cutters to pry the cage open and get to the heart. As an object that was priceless to the church but had little monetary value, the relic was a strange choice for such a carefully plotted heist. 6 years after O'Toole's heart vanished, Irish police found it undamaged in Dublin's Phoenix Park. An intelligence investigation indicated that the thief may have returned it because they thought it was cursed. A new enclosure was built for the heart, which went back on permanent public display in November 2018. Number 8. Xenomorph Skulls. Many societies throughout the ancient world engaged in a practice called intentional cranial deformation, or ICM, which involved purposely reshaping their head. Archaeologists unearthed some of the oldest known evidence of the custom in 2019 at the Neolithic Houtaomuga site in northeastern China. There, they found 11 skeletons bearing evidence of cranial modification dating back from between 12,000 and 5,000 years ago. Also sometimes known as head binding, there is evidence of this practice going back thousands of years all over the world. Evidence of ICM goes back at least 13,000 years in human history, with the oldest skulls being found in Australia, but maybe even longer. Houtaomuga is one of the only known archaeological sites containing signs of the practice, spanning a vast 7,000-year span. Cranial modification is performed in infancy, when a baby's skull is still soft and it is wrapped tightly between 2 boards to give it a flat, elongated shape, a bit like Ridley Scott's Xenomorph. Not everyone had these elongated skulls, but archaeologists think that this was mostly done by the upper classes, since burials for people with these skulls usually contain more valuable grave goods than others. While we still don't fully understand why people used to do this in the past, it created a very distinct identity for the people who had it, and scientists are excited to compare the finds from this archaeological site to others in the area to learn more about the people who lived there and this cultural practice. Number 7. A structure frozen in time. A farmhouse in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland, that looked pretty ordinary from the outside served as a spooky time capsule before it was demolished 2 years ago. The home's last occupant, a man known as Dessie, was the last of 3 brothers who lived there. He moved out in 2015 and into a nursing home, where he passed away 2 years later. It was only then that someone discovered that his home was frozen in time. Nobody had touched it in decades, and Dessie only used 2 rooms during his final years there. The abandoned structure contains a treasure trove of dust-covered early 20th century artifacts, including newspaper clippings, hundreds of love letters, books, magazines, photographs, money, and even paperwork regarding the 1851 Ireland census. There are also unused glasses, rusting kettles, tin stacked on shelves, a half-smoked pipe, and other items still sitting where the homeowner last placed them. An old shirt hangs from a curtain rod against faded drapes near a clock frozen at 12:15, and a derby hat and briefcase sit perched on the antique living room furniture. Little is known about Dessie despite the generations of belongings he left behind. His neighbors knew him as a dairy farmer and a fantastic cook, according to Rebecca Brownlee, who was invited to photograph the cottage before it was torn down. Thankfully, she removed some of the items from the house for preservation. The home was willed to Dessie's neighbor, and all that's left of it, besides the belongings salvaged by Brownlee, are her images of the eerie state it was left in. Number 6. Ofuka Cho Mass Grave. Earlier this year, archaeologists excavated a series of strange circular holes at the Ofuka-cho site in Osaka, Japan. The holes contained the remains of over 1,500 people and animals squished inside, creating a large cemetery. The bizarre burials date back to the mid to late 1800s during Japan's Edo period and include piglets, horses, and at least one cat. Officials discovered the graves near a busy train station in Osaka during the early construction stages of a new skyscraper. There is a conspicuous absence of valuable goods in the burials, leading experts to suspect that they belonged to people who could not afford nicer tombs. Some of the remains show signs of disease, so it's also possible that the deceased died during a 19th century epidemic that swept through the area. Some researchers say that there might have been an outbreak of syphilis around this time, which would explain the mass grave. Besides finding the small, round holes filled with bones, archaeologists also uncovered coffins filled with several bodies each, which adds to the theory that the burials contained victims of a deadly disease. Nearby were also 350 urns. Following the discovery, city officials said that the graves likely belonged to young people and children who lived locally. At the time of their deaths, the area was a farming region. "It was our first historical discovery of a burial site in Osaka," said Yoji Hirata, an official from the Osaka City Cultural Properties Association. "The findings will provide details of burial traditions of ordinary people back then." Scientists continue to study the remains and will reveal their findings most likely next year. Number 5. Eerie Shipwreck. The ruins of the SV Karl, a German ship that ran aground off the Cornish coast during World War I, reappeared in late 2019 during low tide following a violent storm. The British Navy was towing the 60-foot, 3-masted, steel-hulled sailing vessel to London in 1917, with plans to dismantle it for scrap metal, when it became stuck on a reef during a storm and broke away from its tow line. It sounds like it knew what was coming. Tugboats made 2 attempts to refloat the ship after salvage experts noticed that the hull seemed undamaged, but their efforts were in vain, and the SV Karl was ultimately declared a loss and abandoned in place. Shortly thereafter, it became buried in sand. Late last year, the long-buried ship briefly emerged from the sand, giving people an opportunity to catch a glimpse of the ghastly wreck. This isn't the first time that the ship has revealed itself to beachgoers. It often appears during winter, when storms wash away the sand covering it, according to Cornwall Live. But the vessel is never exposed for long before the sands wash back over it, reconcealing it. The sand has helped to preserve the SV Karl, which is in surprisingly good shape for its age. It's just one of an estimated 6,000 shipwrecks along the 250-mile Cornish coastline. Number 4. A scary massacre. When a Siberia resident named Vitaly Kvasha began digging in his yard in 2019 with plans to expand his home, he unexpectedly encountered human bones, and not just a few of them. The skeletal remains kept turning up, so Kvasha just kept going, putting the bones in flour sacks. The bags started stacking up against his house. "First, I dug up one skull, then another, then it just didn't stop," he told DW News. When the homeowner spoke with the media in October last year, he had found the bones of 60 people and counting. At the time, Kvasha was rushing to get the necessary digging for his home renovations done before winter arrived and the soil froze. "But I don't need to dig much longer," said Kvasha. "Another few meters and I'm at the end of my plot. When I reach the boundary with my neighbor's garden, that's it. Then I'll just pour concrete over it." Clearly the man was ready for the unplanned excavation to be done and over with. But where did all the bones come from? Who did they belong to? Government experts who were dispatched to the site following the gruesome discovery believe that the mass grave dates back to the 1930s, when the Stalinist regime imprisoned and massacred political opponents. In his bid to squash any and all opposition, Joseph Stalin committed horrifying crimes against humanity during his reign of terror as he established communist governments across Europe. The Soviet dictator forced those who dared to speak out against him into a secret system of remote labor camps called Gulags, where many died from starvation, disease, exhaustion, and other effects of the brutal conditions, which included 14-hour workdays in extreme weather and meager nourishment at best. Executions were also common at these hellish establishments. Many accuse the Russian government of avoiding this shameful part of its past, an allegation that to Kvasha is entirely credible. He claimed that he repeatedly asked authorities to help him dig up the dozens of human remains on his property, but they said they lacked the money and resources to assist with the task, promising only to pick up the bones once Kavasha was done unearthing them. Yeah, you go ahead, just put everything in flour sacks and we'll come get it later. No worries. Number 3. A crash from the past. In September 1942, during World War II, a U.S. fighter plane went down off the coast of North Wales. The pilot, 24-year-old Second Lieutenant Robert F. Elliot, crash-landed the Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter during a gunnery practice mission after running into mechanical difficulties. Thankfully, Elliot walked away from the wreck unscathed, but he was tragically reported missing in action several months later. Following the crash, the downed aircraft was buried in 6.6 feet of sand. It reappeared several times over the years when the water washed the sands away, including during the 1970s, in 2007, and again in 2014. Late last year, government officials announced that the plane was given protected status, making it the UK's first legally designated military aircraft wreck conserved for its historic and archaeological value. While this and other lingering World War II wrecks that have reappeared in recent years serve as an eerie reminder of a dark time in the world's history, these wartime landmarks also have sentimental value to the relatives of soldiers who served in wars. My uncle was among those brave and expert fighter pilots who served with distinction during World War II, Elliot's nephew, Robert Elliot, said in a statement following news of the plane's protected status. My visit to the site with my wife Kathy in 2016 was very moving and emotional. Number 2. New forest arbor glyphs. This year has not been good for travel and visiting historical and archaeological sites around the world, so many organizations are turning to the internet so that people can visit virtually. In October, England's New Forest National Park Authority, or NPA, displayed over 100 examples of historic tree etchings called arbor glyphs on its website. The free digital display features an interactive map leading visitors to different carvings, some of which date back centuries, perhaps even as far back as Shakespeare's time. While the NPA embarked on the project in order to record images that are fading and distorting with time, it also offers a convenient way to stave off quarantine boredom. The tree graffiti consists of initials, names, dates, government markings, and witchcraft symbols, according to the BBC. One of the most commonly spotted etchings is of something called the King's Mark, which was used for labeling trees as crown property for shipbuilding during the early 19th century. Not all the marked trees were used, however, because steel and iron eventually replaced timber as primary shipbuilding materials, hence why forest visitors can still spot the King's Mark today. Trees bearing concentric circles were likely marked by witches, who used the symbol as a way to ward off evil spirits. U.S. service members also carved proof of their presence into the bark during World War II. Although the carvings are a long-standing tradition in the forest, park staff strongly caution visitors against leaving their own mark, as the practice is now against the rules. Number 1. Notre Dame Crypt. The April 2019 fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris put the historic building out of commission for a long time. Even parts of the structure that were not damaged in the blaze had to close, including the archaeological crypt that sits beneath the courtyard, which was covered in toxic lead dust, mold, and debris. Cleaning crews spent over a year restoring the crypt, which finally opened in September. It was first made accessible to the public in 1980 and is considered one of Paris's hidden gems, according to Smithsonian Magazine. Occupying over 19,000 square feet of space, it's the largest crypt in Europe. Numerous artifacts were discovered in and around the crypt during excavations between 1965 and 1970. Included among them are a docking port from before the city became Paris and was still known by its Gallo-Roman name Lutetia, remnants of Roman public baths, 4th century ramparts, a medieval chapel basement and road, and the remains of a 19th century sewage system. Notre Dame attracts millions of visitors annually, but many people visit the cathedral without ever knowing about the discreet crypt, which is marked by an inconspicuous side entrance that easily goes unnoticed. If we can ever leave the house again, and you go to visit Notre Dame, be sure to take a peek at this quiet crypt. Thanks for watching! What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you are new here. See you next time! Bye!